without doubts, I think it's by far the best league in England.
How dare you score like that in the Premier League?
Mission accomplished in the Premier League. The American.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the American Scousers TV's Premier League show. This is Match Week 10's recap and review of Match Week 11. I am joined tonight, I guess I should say, I am, as usual, your host, Gally, sitting here in Western Massachusetts. It was a little rainy. Weather was beautiful this weekend.
Oh, we're doing weather
updates
on this show.
Well, we do weather updates on every program, and it's basically wouldn't be. This is my favorite part. This show's not even live, and they get what the weather is on whatever day I record it. But in all seriousness, how are you, my friend, out in Chicagoland?
Good. A crisp 40 degrees. Having flashbacks of when we used to take the little ones trick-or-treating. Obviously, it's Halloween tomorrow. So we're recording this on a Monday, the 30th over here. And yeah, having like flashbacks of, and you know, kind of nostalgic, I have to say. It is painful, but if you have kids you're trick-or-treating with and you're bitching about how cold it is and you have to have a hot chocolate or a drink to keep you warm and stuff, enjoy these moments because you will miss it eventually. So take advantage.
It is funny that you mentioned that. Kelly and I were talking. You know, Kelly grew up in Western New York, so it was freezing cold all the time. And, of course, I'm here in Western Mass, so it's the same type of weather most times. And we joked about how our moms would buy our, like, when we were real little, you know, when you get those plastic costumes where it just came with, like, the plastic mask with the rubber band around your head and the eye holes you couldn't see through. Our moms would buy those costumes like a size and a half bigger than they needed to be because you had to bank on the fact that there might be a hoodie and a winter jacket under there. Because nothing was worse than like being Iron Man and having to wear like your Columbia jacket over it and then being like, what are you? In every house, you're like unzipping the stupid thing. Like, I'm
an
Superman.
Iron Man who's cold.
Yeah, exactly. An Iron Man who's cold. Basically the story of my life. So let's get right to it here. We'll start out the same way we normally do. Little kind of potpourri. Run around a few of these fixtures here. We'll stay away from the United City match as that was kind of the feature and marquee match of the week, which we'll spend a little bit more time talking about here. Normally with Bickler and I, we'll kind of pick a match or two and kind of like bounce it off each other, talk about how it went and what it might mean to the league. I'll start here. One of the biggest matches of the weekend for me, as that could shape some of the entertainment factor of it, has to be the 6-pointer at the bottom of the table. You know, Bournemouth, Burnley, not as much about the match, Timucin, because as I've used in the past, I don't expect you to have watched it, seeing that no one in the United States watched this match, not the Bournemouth or the Burnley supporters. But what does it say for Bournemouth to be able to come back from down a goal, get two at home, find a way to secure 3 big points and kind of pull themselves away? Is this talk more about Bournemouth knowing how they can win these must matches against the bottom half? Or is this more that Vince and company genuinely is kind of out of his depth, maybe managing at this level tactically against the likes of the Premier League?
I think that's the key word, right? Tactically. I still feel like Burnley is a little too naive. And we're in week 10, so it's time to wake up. Like I would expect, I think, you know, like we talked about this maybe like a month or so ago, maybe in the panel show, that, you know, eventually they'll realize that, hey, this stuff does not work in the Premier League. You gotta adjust yourself and you gotta play accordingly. And as you know, ugly as can be, I mean, heck, Burnley fans are used to it because they used to have a douche over there. So like sometimes you gotta play, ugly or not, for the points, because at the end of the day, staying up is more valuable. I think Bournemouth shows kind of like their experience here, and they know that, like you said, these are 6-pointer games. And you look at that bottom of the table, a 3-point, I mean, 3-point is like 12 points down there because the wins and even the draws are coming so like difficult to come by. So getting 3 points from this game is huge for Bournemouth. And I'm sure we'll talk about like the Everton as well. I mean, like I say, these guys, by getting these 3 points, it's almost like getting 9 points, because it's going to take the other guys 5-6 games to get the 3 points that you just got in 1 week.
Yeah, so let's move to that match, because that was another one I thought we'd probably talk about. West Ham Everton, London Stadium. Everton goes out, does a, and that's a great result for Everton. Let's not kid ourselves. West Ham's been playing well. Everton has not played well, home or on the road, for the better part of, well, feels like two and a half seasons, basically since Ancelotti, ran out in the middle of the night for the hot girl in Madrid. And Everton goes on the road. They get, a Dominic Calvert-Lewin goal. I think we all said if Dominic Calvert-Lewin can stay fit and play enough matches, he'll score enough goals to probably keep Everton up. But I think it had more to do with their defensive stability, specifically Branthwaite and Tarkowski. I mean, from all accounts, Branthwaite was head and shoulders the best player on the pitch. I will sneak breaking news, Everton supporters. Take every opportunity to root for this kid while you can, because he will not be playing for your club much longer, because he's a top 6 Premier League talent defender right now, which means he's probably going to be starting at Arsenal or Spurs next year. It would be painful if we sent him to United, but that would almost be perfect. You leave Everton, you go to United, and you'll lose in both places. How about them apples? So I'll use my normal question. Does this talk more about Everton and Sean Dyche starting to figure things out, or is this a little bit of those cracks coming up for David Moyes? They had a bad result in the Europa League at Olympiacos on Thursday.
Yep.
So you go Thursday, Sunday, and you lose both of them. Who does this speak more about?
Probably, in terms of like speaking about, is probably West Ham, because they just, like I put, normally if you look at the squads, you might put West Ham and Villa at about the same level in terms of quality they have in the squad, right? But the consistency that you get from Villa, you just don't get at West Ham. And I think that's probably mainly due to the managers, the system, whatever the case might be. But definitely, it says a lot about West Ham in that sense. But for Everton, it does say, like we were just talking about, like the Bournemouth Burnley thing, right? Like the naivety and like, you got to get points. Sean Dyche, or Sean Douche, as I like to call him, knows how to defend, right? And he knows how to get points. So he knows to be able to stay up, you got to go for the clean sheet first. Do not concede. And then if you get one, you get one. If you don't, you get 1 point. And 1 point a game is more than enough for you to stay in this league. So that's the way they approach. And like Calvert-Lewin, if he's there, they must have 1 goal, mind you. But if he's there, he can get you some goals, because Everton's issue usually is like, where the hell are the goals going to come from?
Right.
And, if you can defend, let's face it, even against like Liverpool, we had a tough time. When they, sit back, and if Sean Dyche can set up his defense the way he wants, when they park the bus over there, they're well drilled. It's a hard team to break apart. And then, anything counters, set pieces, anything can happen. They have a bunch of guys who can be effective in set pieces as they go forward. It's disgusting and ugly to watch, but it's Sean Dyche football. So I think it kind of like says what Burnley is lacking, I think Everton has. And that's why I think Everton will stay up and Burnley probably won't.
Yeah, I completely agree with all that. And I will say, you mentioned Villa there. Let's use Villa as the third game there. They get the was it 3-1? Yeah, they get a 3-1 win over Luton. In classic fashion, it was never that close, as Luton scored 180th minute or whatever it was to just basically deliver the Timucin special for anyone that predicted that match, that listens to any of our prediction shows. So Villa comes out, plays great. I think if I read it right today, they've won 12 straight Premier League matches at home.
Yes.
12. That is a ridiculous number on the spin. I don't care how you line up those fixtures, who they've played during that time.
Oh, yeah.
You beat 12 of anybody in a row, and that's not 12 without a loss. That is 12 consecutive W's, which means you're not only coming out and delivering on what your manager's putting you out there to do, but you're like delivering on what you practiced all week. You're delivering as a unit. They have something going, and we're going to look at the table in a little bit, and they are right there with a shout to make an argument that they have every bit of a reason to believe they can finish in the top 4. So I will ask you right now, can Aston Villa finish in the top 5 of the Premier League this season?
No. And I base this off of, we have our Premier League panel show, and Shay is from, Shay represents Villa over there. And I think the biggest concern that Villa fans have in terms of, especially with Emery, is the fact that lack of rotation. Well, we've talked about, for Liverpool for ages with like Klopp. And so I think most Villa fans will admit that they're kind of worried that, especially with some of the injuries they already have, the squad is not as deep as it should be anyway. So when they play these, like Thursday, Sunday, and stuff like that, one, you're not fielding a fresh team. And two, you're probably going to end up getting more injuries as well. So I think that is the only thing. If they do add some maybe more depth in January, they definitely have the coaching and they have the squad to be able to do it. And that home field, I mean, they have that. That's huge when you win 12 games at home. When you feel the 13th one, there's a certain confidence in you that this is going to be ours. So that's huge for a team. I think they definitely have the capability, but if they do not really add some like key pieces to the depth in January, I just feel like they will eventually fall off, similar to, what happened to West Ham and stuff like that. When you don't rotate as much, those Thursdays eventually get to you when you don't have that depth.
Yeah, you'd like to believe that they would, if they got close to the second half of the season, be like, fuck the goddamn Europa League, or Europa Conference. But we both know that there's nothing in the DNA of Unai Emery in a knockout competition that doesn't say go win this bleeping thing. Like it's in his coaching ethos, because it's why he's still getting jobs. It's because he's won at Villarreal, Valencia. He's won at at Sevilla. He won everywhere he's ever been. He's a serial winner. And I think it's why I don't think they could ever give up a cup competition, because he believes in a one-off match. He can outcoach anyone in the world, because he's kind of proven in a one-off match. He can
that's why they're doing cups. Yep.
Anyone in the world. So it'll be interesting for me. The fact that top 5 gives you a shot at Champions League makes me hope that they will be able to stick around. But I'm with you. I think they need to buy players to be able to stick around and have that wherewithal, or just have a bad run of results that get them knocked out of Europe. But I think we both know no English Premier League team is going to go to that Conference League and not make it to the quarterfinals, if not the semifinals.
Exactly.
And you are so head and shoulders better than your opponents.
That style that you're talking about, where he is going to play to win, and whoever is going to be available is going to play. And he's not going to think that what's going to come up on Sunday is going to be like, all managers say we approach it a game at a time, but the smart ones always kind of look ahead at the same time. They just don't admit it to the media, to the fans, and more importantly, to the rest of the players. But I think that's like, Emery is really hardcore. He just looks at that day. He's like, I don't even know who we're playing on Sunday. So I think that eventually does hurt you, though, because you kind of overloaded. But yeah, if they do some stuff in January, I definitely have faith in his overall management that could be a top 5 team, especially since, you see a lot of cracks in some of the other teams that you would assume perhaps to go up there normally, before the season started. If you said United, Chelsea, and stuff like that, you see so many cracks in those that the door is wide open for you to kind of like walk through.
It's funny you mentioned Chelsea. We haven't even gotten to bashing them, and I'm sure we'll try to find a spot by the end of the show. It's normally its own segment, but I feel like it's almost kicking a team when down if you have to watch your team play Brentford the way they have, and know the fact that Brentford has been in the Premier League for 3 years and hasn't lost to Chelsea at Stamford Bridge yet. That is baffling to me. 3 trips in a row, they have won that matchup. Also baffling to me, well, I got to ask you. I know you guys have covered these topics on the morning shows, but it was announced this week that the official 10-month suspension for Sandro Tonali. There were some rumblings that maybe it wasn't going to be upheld, or it hadn't been actually like agreed upon by UEFA. And believe it or not, Newcastle was actually planning to register him for the match this weekend. And the league had to step in and say, no, 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 no. He is not eligible to play in England. So that lets you know that oil money is getting thick when they believe that they can get a guy who's been banned by UEFA for 10 months to get registered on a Sunday. I don't want to go into the nuts and bolts because I don't think our listeners or viewers really care about what Sandro Tonali or his family were betting on. But let me ask you, Timucin, what is it about these knuckleheads? Is it sheer addiction, like Ivan Toney kind of claims he has, that he placed bets for 150 out of 165 days on all sports? Is it Phil Mickelson's caddy saying, yeah, this guy has lost $1 billion over the last 10 years in betting on sports? Like, are they just regular human beings? Or have we built them up all their lives on these pedestals that they don't think they'll ever get knocked down or they'll ever get caught because, well, we've never really treated them like regular human beings in like the regular walk of life? Because it makes no sense to me, but I'm a regular person.
See that, and here's another thing. Like, I don't, aside from watching Liverpool, probably we don't have another addiction. I mean, I don't. Coffee, maybe. I don't know. Like, it's kind of. I mean, addiction is a real thing. I mean, I don't want to kind of like underestimate that or make it seem like it's not a big deal or whatever like that. And I understand, they can be addicted, but you can be addicted to betting and just bet on golf, bet on racing or something. You know what I mean? Like, it's not this, you're not addicted. You're addicted to gambling, right? You're like, hey, I can turn this on, another one. I mean, that's what addiction is, right? But I mean, it's, you can still gamble. You can still feed your addiction. Just don't do it in the sport. And that's why, to me, it's not excusable. Because if it was just an, addiction, like, I don't know, like substance abuse or something like that, maybe you can kind of like, I would probably look at it a different way, because we all know someone who has gone through the hassles of it and the troubles of it and stuff like that. But something like this, like, dude, be addicted 24/7, but just bet on bowling, just bet on golf, bet on whatever. Just don't bet on this, because you know why? The millions you're betting, this is where that's coming from. So use the money from there. Just bet everywhere else, because I think the moment you start betting in your sport, and I don't care if he's betting for himself to win, I don't care if he's betting for other leagues or whatever, as somebody in the sport, you have insider info. So automatically there's a huge gray area. So
Correct.
Don't bet. Just bet on other sports, feed your addiction. That's why I feel like whenever people I feel bad for people who have actually real addictions. And I'm not saying this is not a real addiction, but because I feel like this is almost like an excuse. Oh, I'm addicted. That's why. Bro, just find a different sport to bet on. You can still be addicted. I don't think you're addicted to gambling. Nobody's addicted to football gambling. You're just
Correct.
addicted to gambling. And that's why I don't take it as an excuse. It's probably a combination of both, to answer your question, where they feel like it's not a big deal. I'm too big and I'll get away with it. And you get away, maybe you do it once, and then that's maybe when the addiction kicks in. You're like, oh, let's do it again. Let's do it again. Before you know it, you're like neck deep in it.
I completely understand the folks that are addicted to gambling. I can see it. I've lived it. I know people who have, I've seen it firsthand from close friends. I've also seen it affect their jobs. Here's the thing. If gambling was going to affect your job to the point where you weren't allowed to do said job or get paid by that job, then you wouldn't gamble on those things, or you'd make that decision. And Sandro Tonali made that decision. And for that, I don't feel bad for him. I feel bad for Newcastle. I do. I feel bad for the club who paid a lot of money. I feel bad for the player from the standpoint that I think he wants to be with his teammates and with the Italian national team. But ultimately, you have to know what you're doing. And it's not like he's refuting any of this. So for that, he knew what he was doing was wrong the entire time.
Yep, exactly.
And he knew it was against the rules, and he knew if he got caught, there'd be stiff punishments, which is why he tried to avoid getting caught the way that he did. And that makes it even worse. And, he's a young kid. He's got a long, long career ahead of him. I hope he learns from this. And he comes back 10 months from now, and he's a great player because I love watching him play because I think he's really, really great. That being said, I don't feel for Newcastle one bit because my gut tells me they probably had an inclination that this shit was going on because they know everything about these players, and they were just willing to gamble and roll the dice.
Maybe they're into the gambling as well.
That was roll the dice. Speaking of rolling the dice, seems like every single time Man City plays United, they roll the dice, and it usually comes up snake eyes, and they bet on 1-1. 3-0 City. My opinion, probably wasn't even that close. Match, by all accounts, for me, the match was done at 10:35 when I looked Eastern time, when I was watching the Liverpool match, and I saw the lineup come out, and Johnny Evans and Maguire were starting, and Lindelof was at right back.
He was left back, even worse.
Oh, left back, sorry. Yeah. And I should mention as well, they also started a dead carcass in Sofran Amrabat because that dude literally got about 15 total runs in, and they were like, this is a mistake. Like, they honestly put out a lineup with 5 guys who couldn't run against a team that was going to have possession all game long. And I want to stay a little bit on the football match before we talk about the fallout that was kind of the post-match and the review of it. For you, what were your thoughts on the penalty with Højlund taking down Rodri and them giving the penalty through VAR?
That's soft. I mean, I'm sorry, but that is soft. And most teams do not get that. So thank you, Michael Oliver, I think, right? What a coincidence.
Paul Tierney.
Is it Paul Tierney? I thought it was Oliver on VAR.
Oliver was on VAR to ask Tierney to look at it, right?
Yeah, but it came from, because it wasn't called on the pitch, right? It came from VAR.
It wasn't called on the pitch. He told him he thought he should go take a look. And supposedly what they said was that the arm is across the body and the fact that he actually kind of grabs the shirt and pulls down. Now, I also think Rodri throws himself to the floor as soon as he feels the contact. This is one of those ones that I always put up there in the, if they call it, you can feel hard done by, right? That if they call this penalty, you can feel hard done by. But if they call this penalty, you still got to look all your teammates in the face when you get in the dressing room and hold your hand up and go, I gave him a fucking chance to call that. Like,
that's fair.
Like, I'm not going to say that's a stone cold pen. The Liverpool supporter in me thought it was funny. I won't lie. I was hoping for a draw. I can never root for United to win, even if that's what's best. Maybe if it meant us winning the league, but rooting for United to win at home in a game where their own supporters are, sick to their stomach before it starts is usually something I am excited about. So the match goes in. He starts Johnny Evans and Harry Maguire and Lindelof with Rafael Varane, a World Cup winning starting center back who started in 4 out of 5 Champions League finals at one point for Madrid on the bench. Ten Hag trying to get fired, trying to make a point? Or is he genuinely trying to just say, I know my players better than all you and I'm smarter than all of you? Because that would be the Dutch way to go, right? I'm smarter than you. Just look at me.
Yes. I think that's more what it is. Like, no, you guys don't know, and I do. And I mean, there's so many issues with that. And you can argue, I know, some United fans obviously are already done with this experiment, but like Glazers and stuff like that. I mean, you look at that squad they put out, and it just does not make any sense to me. Because you have if it was like you take over a squad and you're like, okay, this is not fitting what I want to do. You know, you get rid of the hair, you bring Onana in because you want a goalie that can play with the feet, right? You do a move like that, okay, fine. But I don't understand why did you spend all this money in getting Anthony, but then you're playing Bruno Fernandes on the wing. There's a lot of like trying to overthink and trying to look smart. It's like almost like Pep-like. Maybe it's like a bald head thing. I don't know. But you know, like trying to kind of like outsmart and do like think out. Don't think outside the box, dude. Like you have a guy who did his best work as much as we can. I can't stand him, and I'm probably you can't either. Most other fans can't. And you have him not playing as a 10 where he does his best work. You keep dunking him on the wing, but you have like 90 million sitting on the bench who's a winger. You spent a ton of money getting Mason Mount. And that's where I think like when do you blame a manager or do you blame the organization and stuff like that? When you invested the money and bought all these guys and you're not starting them, then it's on you. It'd be one thing to come in and be forced some guys on you and then you're trying to make something work, so you're kind of experimenting and stuff. But that's not the case here.
The guys he's playing are the ones that were forced on him.
Yep.
He started McTominay.
Like reverse.
I mean, he started McTominay and Maguire.
Yeah.
Like in Lindelof, he started 3 players he claimed he didn't want in his side.
And he wanted to sell.
He wanted to sell them all, and now they're starting. And then you start, you start Amrabat with McTominay, which is, I'm sorry, I will raise my hand and admit it as a Liverpool supporter. I was spot on wrong. I watched the World Cup. I saw a few highlights of the Amrabat guy. We needed a midfielder last year. I was like, this guy's available for 30 million. Just spend the money and get him. We dodged a bullet twice not signing this guy. He looks absolutely cooked. He's not quick enough to play in the Premier League. He doesn't even really compete. He is so much worse a footballer than Fred. United went and signed a player worse than Fred.
Yes.
And then they go out there and like we always said, and I know you were not a hater of Fred, like I wasn't a hater of Fred. I always felt like he got the worst stick of any of the United players. Like he took, and then anytime I watched him play, he's the only guy who ever looked like he cared. And he played hard the whole time he was on the pitch. And, they'd be better off starting. They would have been better off Sunday afternoon to start Fred in their midfield.
Oh, easily.
And literally that guy's playing in Turkey and they got, 85-year-old, 700-pound Casemiro sitting on a red card on the sidelines. They got Mason Mount sitting on the bench, then getting told at halftime, go save the game for us and go in for Sofran Amrabat. You weren't better than to beat him out. They got Reguilon playing big minutes. Guy was a castaway at Tottenham that they got on the last day of the transfer window. Now they're talking about paying extra because they weren't even willing to put a clause in to sign the guy as an automatic buy. So everything's in shambles. So as our last talking point, I thought this was kind of a nice image as they're both basically one's pointing at the coach and the other's like, stay the fuck away from me, please, right? And I do believe this is like a tale of two narratives. So I don't know if you heard, Roy Keane, he went on an absolute vitriol tirade on Bruno Fernandes and how if he were the manager of United, he would strip him of the captaincy this morning. It's not just on yesterday's performance. It's all the performances, including quitting against Liverpool last year.
Yep.
The way that he's always arguing on the pitch, the fact that he's never once taken any ownership or blame for anything that happens at United. It's always other players, referees, the causes against them. Is that too critical on Fernandes? Was it almost just shame on United for taking a guy with the temperament and personality of Bruno Fernandes and trying to make him the club captain, especially to replace an actual good leader in Harry Maguire, who never actually showed he did anything to have the armband stripped from him?
Well, the problem is, somebody on the pitch has to wear the armbands, and because he didn't want Maguire and he wanted to sell him, it didn't fit him. Obviously, it had to be somebody else. I mean, here's the issue, and I think I speak about it on our podcast before. Like my brother's a United fan, and this is a discussion we've had with him because he can't stand Fernandez's antics. I think as a player, we know his potential and the things he can do, but I would never want him on my team. Leave alone want him as a captain on my team. But here is the issue that it comes down to, and this is the mess that United is in. And obviously, as a Liverpool fan, it's fun to watch from far away. Is let's say, okay, you're like, yeah, Keane, you're right. Let's take it off of him. Who are you giving it to? Who is on that squad right now that fits? Yes, this is the kind of captain we want. They're complaining about Rashford. They're saying that Rashford should not even, based on his performances, should not even be playing. He only plays because somehow his grandfather then. So you look around that lineup. I mean, Maguire, you can't give it to him because he's normally shouldn't even be in the starting 11. I mean, I guess Evans. I mean, Evans is starting with him. I mean, in summer, it was a joke that he was practicing with him. The dude is starting the Manchester Derby. So I don't know. You take it from this guy. Who do you give it to? It's the lack of options. In summer, when Hendo went to generational wealth in Saudi Arabia, we had a conversation on who we wanted the captaincy to go. And we had candidates. Do you give it to Van Dijk? Do you give it to Robertson? Because you have people who are captaining. You have a young kid in Soboslai who captains his national team. So you have captains of your national teams on your squad as a Liverpool fan to pick and choose from. It's, you're kind of like going through the dumpster to find something to eat to give the captaincy band to when you're United. And that's really the biggest issue of the squad and the club as a whole.
He probably should have. I mean, hindsight being 2020, he probably should have just given it, as I like to refer to him, Fat Drake. He probably should have just gave it to Casemiro. He had the
experience and stuff.
Experience. He played at the highest level at Madrid. He's captain Brazil. You've been a captain for your country. I think you could be a captain for United. I'm with you. I think, honestly, in a perfect world, if Mason Mount had hit the ground running and was a guaranteed starter every week, literally you could almost be like, this is the change we wanted. This is what we bought. But because it hasn't worked out, and I mean, it is epically failed for Mason Mount since he's come in. This is a kid who captained Chelsea before he was 20 years old. So I think there's at least an undertone there. I think he wants it to be Lisandro Martinez, but then that kid goes in for a 2-footed tackle anytime you don't need it on the outside of your box. And He plays almost with a little bit, to your point from the summer, he plays with a little bit too much of that Andy Robertson red ass in him.
Yep.
That you might lose something from Lisandro Martinez if you asked him to be your captain. And let's be honest, they don't have one. Because the one guy who fits the mold, the kid who got to your club at 6 years old and worked his way all the way up and has done nothing but succeed, this manager has been trying to get rid of McTominay ever since he got there.
Yep.
He would be a prime example of a kid you'd make the captain. He grew up through the youth ranks. Let's be honest. Bayern Munich supposedly is coming in this January for Scott McTominay. Bayern believes he is a player of their level. Ten Hag doesn't think he's good enough to play for the team that currently sits 8th in the Premier League. So let's spin the conversation to Ten Hag as we start to wrap this up. Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher had their, once a week scripted for TV argument. You'd think they watch Stephen A. Smith and Shannon Sharp or whatever talking yokes around here every morning, right? It's like they're almost doing it over there. They just get in a pissing match and then they yell at each other and they're like, meh, meh, meh. The only difference is they sound like two Muppets and no one can understand them. But Neville wants it. Neville wants everyone to know it has nothing to do with Ten Hag. This is 100% culture, the Glazers, and management. I understand that Ten Hag wasn't given a great hand, but he's played the hand. How he handled Ronaldo, how he's handled Sancho, how they're handling Anthony, how little he's gotten out of everybody else. So, is Ten Hag part of the problem? Is Ten Hag part of the solution? Or does it not really matter? Because until United blows this thing up and really starts over, are they just going to every other month have a new person to point their finger at with all the problems. Like, where do you think it lies, and how much more time do you think he has?
I don't think he has a lot of time. I really thought the whole Galatasaray loss at home, they were lucky to win the game after. Otherwise, I think that was like going to be the tipping point. Um, Basically, it's the last thing you said. I think it's unfixable unless you blow the whole thing up. He was initially part of the solution, but now I think he has become part of the problem. He just basically could not do it. You bring somebody to clean it up and do certain things, and he just could not do it. I mean, you see it with the Sancho ordeal, or like the problem was a lot bigger than something Ten Hag can handle. It wasn't just about tactics and stuff like that. I think there's way too much personnel problems, ego problems, squad problems, and stuff like that. It's not just like X's and O's and who's going to play where and what we're going to set it up, what system, blah, blah, blah. Because like I say, when I was saying earlier, it goes back to you bring in a bunch of guys for a ton of money. Those should be your base, your spine of your team, and everybody, you keep adding to those pieces. They're not, and I think that's the problem. So what you brought in has not worked, and then you lose credibility as you keep doing that. I mean, if you spend 100 million here, 80 million there, and just sitting on the bench, well, dude, what you're doing is not working, so you don't know what you're doing now. So if you have support of some of the fringe guys, you're, I think, losing them now as well, because they see it clearly not working. So I think from a possible part of the solution, he has become part of the problem now.
Yeah, I feel like it comes down to the fact that I think he would have failed had he gotten the Bayern job, with how good that Bayern team was. And they went through two managers. Nagelsmann didn't work out. Tuchel came in. It's been rough on Hansi Flick lost his job. Then it was rough on. So they have proven, in my opinion, that side needed help. And they were looking at Ten Hag before that whole exodus of 3 different managers in 3 years.
Yep.
And I think what it comes down to is this is a man who is exceptional, a lot of ways like Unai Emery, at working with players who need to be coached. And I think what he did to build that Ajax team that got to the Champions League semifinals and had the heartbreaker against Spurs, he molded those great young players. He created a team. He taught that they did everything he said. They woke up when he told them. They were home at night. They brushed their teeth. They flossed. They did all the things that the house man said, right? And he loved it. He was in full control. And you see how he handled the whole Sancho situation, how he's even handled the Anthony situation. I didn't love the way he answered the Mason Greenwood questions. At times, we all questioned even whether taking the stance he did with Ronaldo was actually best for the club and best for the players on the pitch. Like, at times he handled that poorly, and he's just so damn arrogant. And it's one thing to be arrogant when you're winning. It is a whole nother thing to be this arrogant when you're losing.
Exactly.
So we're going to get you out of here on this, folks. If you haven't already, please give the channel a subscription, smash that button, get all of your new content from us. We'll be back. We do Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 10 Eastern, 9 Central. We're on every morning with our morning coffee show, brought to you by Reckless Coffee. And then, of course, we have our Monday podcast, our Thursday night podcast, our fantasy show, our panel show. We have pre-match, post-match. So like and subscribe.
Yep.
Send us a comment. If you want to get involved, please go ahead and let us know how. We're always looking for new friends and contributors. Well, you want to call crazy people like us friends. We would love to have you. So for all of us at American Scouser TV, thank you for watching and have a great week.